Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the kickoff meeting for the first OpenJS Collab space for package. I got to get the name correct because it's a long one. We chose verbosity over easy to say. Package vulnerability management and reporting collaboration space.
I think we need a nickname.
We have an agenda. Yeah. Do we have an abbreviation? PVMRCS is also probably a pretty tough abbreviation. We'll see how it goes. Well, since we're the only collab space, we can maybe just say the collab space for now, and then once new ones get spun up, we'll have to be a bit more creative. Excellent. There is a meeting agenda posted in the chat. It's pretty light. Basically, we'll just do introductions. I wanted to give us a little bit of time to make sure this meeting time was going to work for folks. And then we'll jump into the actual topic. So scope, I figure a lot of this time will be brainstorming. So, we've talked a lot about what the collab space means, but I think we have been trying to purposely leave the solutioning and the sort of like actual initiatives we're going to undertake until we got everybody together. So I wanted to give a little bit of time for that. And then lastly, just takeaways, next steps, because I imagine we'll have a bunch of those from this. Does anybody have anything else they think we should have on the agenda? Oh, okay. Excellent. Well, then I'll start. So I'm Wes. I work at Netflix on the Node.js platform team. Previously, I was on our build team, which was responsible for all of the package, open source, and internal library publishing infrastructure, which is really when we started talking about this stuff was while I was on that team. And so we had a lot of the supply chain security domain for JavaScript fell under my role. So when a bunch of this came up in the package maintenance working group and the NPM RFC stuff, and it became clear that there was some things that sort of fell out of the scope of those existing groups. Michael approached Darcy and I to start this and kick it off, and so I'm really excited. It's been a bit of a long road to get to this first meeting, but we had a lot of details to work out about what it means to be a collab space and what things need to be done. But here we are. So excellent. I will hand it off to Darcy as the co-champion. If you're all right to do you wanna? You said you were in transit.
Yeah. Is it too loud right now, or can you hear me okay?
Very good.
Good.
I'll take that as okay.
Take that as a yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So my name's Darcy Clark. I'm the engineering manager on the NPM CLI. Working at GitHub. Very interested in this space. We're doing quite a bit of work right now at GitHub, and obviously within the NPM ecosystem to deal with NPM audits and basically CD management in general. And kind of excited to hopefully have this conversation a few levels up of the tooling stack and ideally collaborate with folks from security organizations across organizations and not just within the two silos that I'm a part of. So yeah, I'm super excited about what we're gonna do here. I have some updates from things that we've been working on internally. Obviously recent news that has come out or recent news that has put a spotlight back on this topic as seems to happen sort of yearly. And yeah, in terms of my involvement for the last 2 years, this has been something that's been top of mind for me. We haven't shipped any new tooling within the NPM CLI around this for a number of years, although we've had, as Wes noted, RFCs and proposals pitched to us, at least at the NPM level. And we're definitely looking at how we can improve that in the near term. So yeah, that's a good synopsis, I guess, of what I'm involved with and what I'm looking forward to working with all y'all on. So yeah, can't see who I can pitch it to next, but feel free to, Wes, if you can pick somebody to go next.
I'll go with Robin.
Sure, Robin Ginn, Exec Director at OpenJS. I think I know most of you. Just want to tell you all that we, think about a collab space just like we would an open source project like Node or Node-RED or anything else. So our team is here to support you. We also have the resources of the Linux Foundation behind us. So if there's other security initiatives, industry people, corporate people, I can be that bridge. So can Jory and the rest of our team.
Maybe we'll let the people who finish pick the next person if they can. That'll be easier than.
Hey, Jamie.
Thanks. Hi everyone. I'm also in transit. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, so my name's Jamie Sloan. I'm the CTO of a company called Hunt.dev. It's a UK-based startup established about 2 years ago. And basically what we focus on is incentivizing disclosures for open source vulnerabilities and of course also the fixes. I've come across a few of you in the chat already, but really we and myself specifically would love to get involved in sort of an open source way as well, just see how we can help maintainers sort out, this kind of big problem that is, sort of working through triaging vulnerabilities, giving maintainers more control over vulnerabilities in their packages, not freaking everyone out when there is a vulnerability. And so, that's something I'm really interested in. I'd love to kind of collaborate with everyone here. So yeah, certainly my first time kind of getting involved in one of these sorts of things, but nonetheless very excited. And I'll go for Jordan.
Everybody, I'm Jordan. I work at Coinbase, where the team I'm on is called Client Foundations, and we're responsible for almost all things JavaScript inside the company. So I share a lot of the challenges that Wes describes. I also maintain a few hundred NPM packages, so I get sort of personally disrupted every time there is a vulnerability reported in the ecosystem. And I have a lot of opinions about that. And then I participate in various Node and NPM spaces to try and improve, and GitHub spaces to try and improve those tools for the ecosystem. So I'm very excited to come up with ways that will avoid undermining the entire security ecosystem while making things more secure for everyone.
You need to choose
and
the
I'm
next
supposed
person.
to pick someone. How about Dominikas?
Hey everyone, I'm Dom. I build things for clients at Neoform. As the case may be, I end up doing a lot of internal tooling stuff and dealing with CI stuffs. And also because of my time zone and the team I'm in, I end up being the first in the morning. So I'm the first responder to all the red builds. So I get to see some of these vulnerabilities bubbling up. And I have a personal interest in that as well, so that it's actually useful and not just a box ticking exercise. So, that's me. Who's sending? Joe?
Hey friends, Joe Seppi here. I'm an open source engineer and advocate at IBM. And I'm active in the Node space and am the chairperson of the cross-project council at the OpenJS Foundation, and I'm generally just kind of interested in this space and want to be helpful. I'll pass it along. I guess since I see Michael up there and he's my buddy, I'll pass it to Michael.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. I'm Michael Dawson, the Node.js lead for Red Hat and IBM. I work with the teams within their companies, and we've certainly run into the cases where we've had to do upgrades or releases because of security vulnerabilities. So interested from that perspective. and also, active in the community, the Node.js community and the project on the technical steering committee, and, just interested in figuring out how we make this better for the overall ecosystem. I think it comes back to what Jordan said. Like, I think we can find a balance where it actually helps security as well as making it easier for the maintainers. And I will pick, let's see, Nodder, have you gone?
Yeah, I just recently joined, so.
You're next then.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Noctur. At least that's my handle for the open source and internet stuff. And at work, everyone calls me ZB because they can't get further than that in my name. Just the first two letters are pronounceable in English. So I'm going to react to both. Anyway, I'm here because I built npm audit resolver a while back, kind of like 4 years ago, and opened an RFC to npm to maybe pull some of the functionality in. And that started some conversation that ended up causing this group to be set up. So I'm the person who brings prior art to the table. And hopefully something more than that. Yeah, let's not get into further details. So that'd be it. Let's look at the list of participants, and I think Jory, did you introduce yourself yet?
I didn't. I think I am last to go. Thank you, Nader. It's nice to meet you. Hello, I'm Jory Burson. I am the community director for the OpenJS Foundation. And my role is to help support all of our 37 plus projects and their many maintainers and TSCs and that sort of thing to be able to take advantage of all of the resources that the foundation has. I'm really excited about this first collab space because first off, it is it's a critical, I think, need, and second, it's our first collab space, which is I think going to be a really great opportunity for us to bring more value to our maintainers and our community. So I'm happy to be here, and also don't forget to give me your GitHub handle if you want me to add you to our repo. And I think that's it. Wes, back to you.
Yeah, awesome. Sorry, I turned off my video, so you'll see the nice OpenJS logo there. Little internet stability. Okay, so quick check-in on the meeting time. We mentioned a little bit that it's late for some of our friends in Europe. I was wondering, do we, I think we have really two options. So one is do the alternating thing, where we do one like around this time and one a bit earlier. I know we also questioned whether Friday was going to be good for long-term meeting scheduling at one point. And I don't know if that still holds. I think almost everybody who was on the original list has been able to make it. I guess we have Laurent who wasn't, but he's even further, right? He's in Israel, so that time zone here is pretty bad. But I think it would be great to get him because the representation of SNCC.
Yep.
Which would be really great. So my proposal would be that we do an alternating time, and try to get one that's pretty, I'll say early in the morning for the folks in like the US West Coast time, like something, like around like 8 a.m. Would probably be best to be able to make that happen. And again, maybe we just alternate every other. I think the decision we had was to meet every month. Again, we can also, that's up for discussion. But then so it would be every other month we'd have an 8 a.m. PST and then maybe alternate to a noon.
So I agree with that, Wes, but that's also what every other meeting that I have that has cross time zone people does. And so those are hotly contested time spots. So it may be difficult to get consistent attendance in both time slots. For
the other choice would be to try and find I don't know, if 12 Eastern, which is kind of in the middle, late enough for Pacific, but in Europe it's 6 or 7 versus 12 midnight or something. I don't know how would that work for people here already?
Oh, I'm gonna cross myself off the list because I'm not a good representation of Europe, because this time is my favorite time for meetings across time zones. So after my kid goes to sleep, I'm the most available. But yeah, don't count me in. Everyone else is doing this as less of a hobby, so you probably need to check with them.
So this time for me works right now, as long as it's not happening like weekly, since the node tooling working group actually has the same time supply as this bi-weekly. And if we want to do something earlier, I can make myself available anytime earlier than this time slot, pretty much.
I would prefer an hour, or at least an hour earlier, because this is roughly the time when my kids do go to sleep, so I need to be there. But other than that, if it's not a Friday, it's probably easier. It's a lucky coincidence that Friday evening is available for a call for me. So yeah, I would prefer a different day, and yeah, hopefully earlier, but yeah, don't let that hold everything back.
Okay, so it sounds like what we should do is a new doodle, but with this in mind. And I would like to get Laurent, because he said he would like to come. It's, again, I think it's just a time problem. Like every meeting we scheduled to get this set up and planned has been midnight for him. So
right, yeah.
It's
And
not great.
Who's West Coast besides me? Jordan? I think that's it, right? And I'm up super early, so I'm fine. I don't know how about you are, Jordan.
I mean, I prefer not to be, but I have young children, so it's not really my choice. As long as it's a morning that I don't have that I'm not the childcare, and I also don't have a meeting conflict, then that should be fine.
Okay, because I'm also totally fine with 7 a.m. So.
Okay, so we'll go back to the drawing board.
I'm reluctantly fine with that.
Reluctantly.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all in the same boat on that. Okay, so we'll take it back to the drawing board, probably open up an issue in the repo with a doodle, preferably non-Friday, preferably a little bit earlier, but we'll open up, a bunch of time slots trying to find non-competing meeting slots. So excellent. Okay, moving on. So this, I think, is the probably the most important thing for us to do today. And that is really nail down what we think the scope of the group is. So we've had some discussions and went back and forth. So I know at one point when we were first discussing this, we were thinking that we'd focus really tightly on the JavaScript ecosystem. And there's a lot of benefits to that. The main one being that it gives us a clear problem space, and we have just known players and known tooling. When we shopped that idea around a little bit, I do remember getting some feedback. Specifically, I remember Miles Borens giving this feedback. I think we got it from a few people, though, is that this is not a problem unique to the JavaScript ecosystem. Some of the key players in this, and he was representing GitHub's view at the time, handle, it's polyglot. Like, they're not just focused on the JavaScript ecosystem. So finding solutions that might work beyond just our scope would have some value. The trade-off there is if we try to bite off too much, we'll drown trying to make something that works for everybody. So I wanted to open up the floor and sort of feel out people's opinions on whether, we think really tightly scoping to JavaScript is the best approach, or if there's, some level of abstraction, or maybe it's really inclusion that we would want to get from people outside of the JavaScript ecosystem. Like, obviously security companies are really important here, but like maybe there's some other groups that we should be reaching out to bring in.
I mean, while I think whatever we do will be much more quickly adopted if it is beyond just JavaScript, right? Like if we come and say the whole JavaScript ecosystem would, like all the big players really want this change, then people will do that for the JavaScript ecosystem. But like if we come and say like across languages and across ecosystems, like with it, all the major players are saying this is a good thing, then like it's kind of table stakes for everyone else. But I think it's useful to acknowledge that the JavaScript ecosystem has both a philosophy of lots of dependencies and also the largest dependency pool to pull from, like period. So we are likely to both see these problems more often and also have the most context for how to fix them.
Yeah, I think I would say, like from my perspective, it would be good to narrow the focus to start with once we have a proposal, then it's worth testing it against some other ecosystems to see like, would this apply? But I think if we try and think of everything to start, we're going to spend too much time like researching and learning and understanding versus us saying, okay, we understand, the people here understand the JavaScript ecosystem. Let's come up with something we think is a way for, potential way forward. And then based on that, consider whether it applies to others versus the other way, or, trying to understand something and pitch something from the very beginning. So I guess I'm advocating for like, let's keep the scope a little bit smaller to start with. We know we should revisit that at some point once we make progress.
So I guess I can.
If we make it work for the JavaScript ecosystem, because of like, okay, I'm going to repeat this, but because JavaScript ecosystem has this the biggest scope of the problem, and there's so many dependencies and the dependency tree is so long. This is specifically why, if it works for JavaScript, it's likely to work for everyone else, but not every other ecosystem is going to feel the need to take part in figuring it out yet because they're not hit as hard. So I think we're in a position to figure it out for JavaScript and keep it in the back of our heads that we don't want to build something that's too specific, so it eliminates some languages out of the box. But I don't think it's realistic to assume we're going to be able to bring in people from other languages to the table with figuring it out, because it's difficult to organize already.
So I guess I can speak to, as being somebody that I feel like is in the camp, working at GitHub, managing obviously the NPM CLI, and then also being a part of this collab space. We're having internally, I can speak to this a little bit, but we're talking with the Dependabot team. We've been talking with our security team, and obviously, within the NPM camp itself within GitHub, we've been having conversations about how we improve this this whole situation and this whole like area for the last few weeks more intensely. And I think what we've come away with from some of those internal conversations is at least a takeaway for our team at NPM to try to facilitate some sort of RFC that scopes the information that we would want to see for potentially some sort of meta information or meta data around CVEs. And we can do that in tandem with any other work that would be done that would be more broad to all ecosystems at large, especially when you consider like the tooling that Dependabot has implemented, at least at GitHub. I know that's GitHub specific, but what we could essentially be drafting here is something that is abstract from, let's say, downstream information that's going to be stored at the advisor DB level. And so that's kind of the next steps that we have in our mind, at least, on how to address this, is still sort of JavaScript and Node focused for us, but we would probably transform like some sort of stream of information, and whatever that like service looks like in the future, like we don't quite know yet, but the idea is that we sort of propose right now what information we would like to see that would be helpful, that would help reduce noise, that could help make better tools to make this situation better for everybody. So I guess that's a little bit of insight, a little bit of an update on how we're thinking about this, and sort of the next steps that my team's going to be taking is at least trying to, take some of the work, that obviously ZB's done and other folks have done, and propose some sort of schema, at least for, let's say, like some sort of like meta information that maintainers could potentially be providing, whether that's considered to be like a counterclaim or whatever that is, that we could then have served to us, similar to the advisory DB service that we have today, have some sort of, alongside that, some sort of information that gives us more understanding about the CV itself, and the packages that potentially are or aren't vulnerable to it, based on maintainers providing sort of feedback. So yeah, I feel like that's. So go ahead.
No. If you go ahead and finish. I was going to sort of segue that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's some really tangible, actionable, and I feel like, apologize if it's jumping to solutioning, but we've been like ideating around this area for a while, and we're sort of getting to a place where we would really want to do something quickly, and so just to say that this is expedited internally, at least in terms of prioritization of work we want to focus on.
I mean, if it's okay to jump to solutioning, I mean, I would say that the biggest thing that could be done is, before any consumers see a vulnerability, the maintainers upstream.
Jordan, I'm just gonna redirect us just for a second. I want to have that conversation, but it's technically in the agenda a little bit later, and I want to make sure we nail down the scope before we go too far. So what I was gonna say is, I think what you said, Darcy, which is really important, is you all are ready to start working on some stuff. And I think we as a group need to help facilitate that, never getting in the way, but help make sure that the alignment with the community is achieved. So like one thing that I would say about, like, you did, and again, I don't want to go too much into the solutioning with like setting the schema for how you're going to share the metadata yet, but that sort of effort, I think, would be really well structured here for us to get feedback from other people in the ecosystem. So I'm thinking, like Jamie on the call, and then if we can get Laurent on the call, I think they would be two great representatives from and I don't want to say the other side, but we're talking, I say that there's the tooling side, which is, what Darcy, you are talking about. But then there's the where some of this information is being discovered, registered, the advisory DB, those things. And I think making sure that we collaborate there is really like what the heart of what I think this group can help achieve. So I'm wondering if maybe a way we could set the scope properly, and then bring in the people who are going to work on the more concrete parts, like what you mentioned, would be maybe if we had like set up non-recurring meetings, but a meeting where like your team could come in, present the work that you're doing and the direction you'd like to go. And we could do the same thing with some of these other teams that are really important in the ecosystem. Again, like some of the security, companies, I'm sure, we'd probably want maybe some maintainers of things that have been particularly hard hit by, maintenance involving, CVE updates, like something like some structure like that, where we can get those teams and be aware of the work they're doing, collaborate on it, give feedback, but not necessarily have it be like, it doesn't need to be owned by this group or the foundation, right? Because the goal here is just to foster the collaboration, not necessarily for us to, definitely not for us to be the only place these innovations are happening. What do y'all think about something like that? So that when we come with those solutions, like Darcy and Jordan were hoping to jump into, we know what different teams are working on and what different directions they're going. Do people like that idea?
I think getting that info is interesting, but like if Darcy, if there's some people who already have some things and thoughts written down, I guess it would be interested to start sharing those and talking about them. And like, I don't know if this is like, are we straying from the scope yet? Like if the scope, like, are you thinking we restrict the scope to in some way on this, or?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, is if we focus really on certain aspects of it, but those aspects have important parallels or maybe like touch points with some of the work that like GitHub is going to be doing, it would be very tough I think it will be unsuccessful. Actually, let me say this flat out. I think it will be very unsuccessful if we push forward for, say, a spec on a schema, and then the people who are probably the closest to that today, GitHub, right, who have that on their probably quarterly plans or something to work on, go in a different direction. Like I'm thinking sort of like how we did with the support spec. We did a lot of work in the package maintenance working group to try to get a like robust specification, and I think it unfortunately did not. We took it to NPM too late, right? And like the goal was to get NPM on board, and then like we already had this big fleshed out, spec. And I see the same risk in this group is if we don't go and understand the work that Darcy wants to do on that, or maybe Sneak already has something implemented and rolled out to their customers that does something similar to this. Like we need to know, because if we can't get those people to adopt the output of our work, it's not going to go anywhere, right? So, and that's, I'm trying to think of a way that we can better collaborate with those key stakeholders to make sure that the scope that we're doing is not like overlapping and divergent from, the work that their work.
I guess I was just thinking, if we just said our scope is going to be, we're going to come up with something we think works in the JavaScript ecosystem and then test this as others, and that's kind of the scope. Then moving on to brainstorming with, like, I fully agree with what you're saying. Like we need NPM and we need Stick, and that's why we've, Darcy's one of the co-chairs here, and we've got Loran. So I guess I don't want to, I'm just thinking, do we really need to spend a ton of time on scope versus getting into the brainstorming the ideas, with the caveat that of course it needs to include, what's already on the table for NPM and SNCC and the other people in the ecosystem who will actually have to implement it.
Yeah, definitely agree. Wanted to add one more thing to this. I'm not sure if this is, if it's just me, but I think the conversation is kind of going towards us having to decide if we want to host the spec for whatever we're going to come up with. And if so, I strongly believe we need to start as soon as possible. So I can donate the JSON schema that I have in NPM Audit Resolver as a starting point. And I'm not going to be upset if it ends up being completely different. And I'm the only owner of this, so it kind of makes it easy in terms of copyright. So we can put this up as a starting point and then let everyone collaborate on that, so that we have a growing standard, which is going to be an equivalent of everyone presenting what they're doing, but it's going to be in Git, so it's going to merge.
That sounds like a good idea to me, to get like something concrete that people can poke holes at. And like you said, like it may end up being totally different, but having something to talk about is a good, and I don't know, you know, Darcy mentioned that there's been some thoughts if there was something that Darcy could, you know, PR in, we could even have a few which we would iterate on and hopefully get to something in the end, right?
Yeah, so I guess taking a step back, and I know we jumped into like the end result here, but I guess taking a step back, if we were also just to outline initially where we believe we should be solving this problem at, like, is there a service, is it a tool, is there existing tooling? So like my head, and I feel like a lot of us, our heads point to the existing NPM audit or the NPM advisory DB as sort of the source of the pain points for most of Node and JavaScript developers right now. And like, that's what we're trying to solve for. So that's kind of, I'd rather just make sure that we get that written out explicitly, that, you know, it's the NPM CLI or it's CRN or it's what tools need to be involved in adopting something as well. Once we figure out what that is, like where are CVEs being made visible, and what tools are making them visible today in JavaScript developers' workflows. I feel like that would be a more inclusive approach versus working backwards from like solution and who's actually going to implement something, right? Like maybe we take a step back, try to essentially scan and get a whole bunch of different use cases of how people are experiencing, let's say, CVEs and where they are visible to them, outline what those are and where those touch points are, and then we know exactly what we want to improve about those different like areas, right? Yeah.
What we can assume NPM registry is the building block of the ecosystem. I'm not sure if we can assume NPM tooling and the database of vulnerabilities is the only platform. So Snake has their own repository of CVEs and advisories and everything. So what we're gonna create here probably needs to be independent of anything other than the registry itself, the package ecosystem. So it should not be built as something that goes into the vulnerability database, any specific one, but something that could be a thing facilitating adoption anywhere. So in this case, trying to solutionize here to give a better example, if we want people to be able to declare what vulnerabilities can be ignored, we get a format in place and we let package maintainers and package users use that format to declare and then let them share it. And sharing could be done anywhere, but one of the ways you could share is publish yours as a package maintainer alongside your package. So that's possible, but then Snake could have their own method of sharing that to be used internally by their customers, might as well. So I think we need to be careful, sorry, Darcy, not to make it too NPM CLI specific and NPM audit specific.
Totally. Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at. And I think that's actually one of the mandates in the original proposal we had. The outcome of this work should be delineating, let's say, the existing sources of truth, the existing actors within the pipeline, and like what we could potentially propose is new models, that abstract models of how these things are communicating together and how to like make that more efficient, and potentially schemas of information and that can be implemented by whomever is at whatever part in that whole process and flow. But I feel like if we don't document that first and we don't take a step back and actually like say, okay, we're who is providing, let's say, CVE information, and then what's their existing sort of like format to having consumers discover that information. How do audits happen right now? Then if we don't do that kind of like documentation process, then I feel like we're, you know, yeah, we're just going to optimize for only one workflow and not, you know, really cover a large enough swath of the ecosystem. And yeah, I don't want to over-index on NPM specific tooling.
Yeah, I like, certainly I know we, you know, there's the NPM SNCC are two tools. There's also like container scanners out there that often use like the OS NPM, you know, in the case of Red Hat, RPM information, and like an index that says this RPM has this version and therefore it has, you know, so those are the three that I'm most aware of. I'm not sure if there's others.
Yeah, so just like if we can get document going, like, and categorizing those players, and then even like creating wireframes or whatever it is, architectural diagrams, and how they communicate with their, like, the people that consume that information through what tools, then we're going to get a better, I think, visual on where it is that we can improve the process, or where we can maybe even kind of standardize across the ecosystem so that we can have the biggest impact with the work that we're doing here.
So I completely agree with what you're saying, Darcy. I think this challenge is that the top of the pyramid, or the source of truth, or the, you know, whatever the source of the river, I don't know what metaphor works here, is like the CVE database. And unless we have them willing to make changes, then we are going to have to see where the closest layer is that we can make changes in. Because if we focus only on making NPM audit and GitHub Dependabot and Sneak's like tools better, then any additional tools or other ecosystems aren't going to benefit from those improvements. And like a solution we come up with here, just like CVEs can arbitrarily at any time change which versions they're claiming are affected, there needs to be some way that arbitrarily at any time that information can be filtered against something else, right? And so, like,
For what it's worth, though, I think we need to go even a step further. You talk about the database, but this doesn't. That's not the source. The database is the security researchers finding the vulnerabilities and reporting them. So I think really what we want to do, and I love the idea of trying to come up with some sort of reference material that we can show people when we're talking about these changes that goes from start to finish. Maybe, like you said, wireframes, you know, whatever structure makes the most sense there, and really point out where we see the areas of improvement are. And I think it should start all the way from how are security researchers finding vulnerabilities in packages. You know, are there things that, you know, steps that they should be taking that they're, you know, beyond just the ones that generally are considered best practice for security vulnerability reporting, but are there things that would help maintainers, would help end consumers be more security minded and conscientious about that? And in order to have that discussion, I think we need to also be making sure we bring those people in, even if we can't, quote unquote, make changes there. Like, in the end, of course, we want to find the areas of leverage where we make the changes, but we need to understand what is happening in the process for those people who are reporting those things. And is there maybe there's extra metadata that they would love to provide, but like the database doesn't accept it. Or maybe they wouldn't mind going in after the CVE gets added to the database and coming to GitHub, you know, and adding some extra metadata in some GitHub UI or NPM UI. Like, there's a bunch of solutions we could take where bringing those folks to the table, I think, could really be a game changer. And it's not just, you know, these organizations that run the databases involved here.
So, and Wes, I think all of the things that we're like bringing more people to the table, documenting everything explicitly, I think those are all excellent ideas. I think what they will do, though, is validate many of our existing intuitions, because I think I suspect, I have no evidence to back it up, but I suspect that I can already answer those questions. That I already roughly know what they're going to say, those security researchers and so on. And I think that we absolutely still need to validate all that, right? Like, even if all of us were just as confident as I am about that stuff, like, we should still validate it. But my suspicion is that if I'm correct, that the issue is that researchers are incentivized to have the most impact, like the broadest reach possible with their reports. They want to find the biggest security problems that hit the most people, you know, and whether their motivation is altruistic to make things more secure, or financial to get the biggest bounty, or a combination of those or others, like, that's still the incentive. And so the problem I see here that we need to solve is not how do we change their incentive structure, because I don't think that's something that we are empowered to do. I think the problem we need to solve is how do we check and balance their incentive structure so that the consumers end up seeing have a different effect. In other words, less of an onslaught of largely false positive security notifications.
Right. And in terms of scope, what I'm also kind of thinking is that it's not the whole thing that we need to try and fix. Like, people today report CVEs against packages, and usually those are actually valid, at least in some context. So, like, I don't know that we need to say, you know, they more or less CVEs need to be reported, but I think the thing is, what we have in the JavaScript ecosystem, and probably in the others to a lesser extent, is because of the deep dependency trees, it's not that the CVE itself needs more information, because it's not the CV that's causing the problem. The problem is that we're transitive, like, we're basically pushing that CVE information from a dependency up through the chain. And as we push it up through the chain, that's where it becomes less and less relevant. So the original CV being reported may be perfectly valid, but because of that chain, we're creating all sorts of false positives. And that's where it does get a little bit more specific to, like, our ecosystem, the way we have the package JSON and the way that it, you know, that's how, you know, the NPM audit, for example, ties a CVE, which is in a dependency, and then reports it against the thing that used it, right? So that piece does seem to me a little bit more specific to our ecosystem. Each one may do it slightly differently, but I think, like, I'm just thinking, like, in terms of focus, it doesn't seem so wrong for us to focus on how we push that CVE reporting through our chain as something a little more specific to our ecosystem. And to focus
So
on
we only
that.
have 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna let's wrap this up. But I wanted to add one quick caveat to that, is the CVE could have things. There are special domain specific languages for describing how you can test if something is vulnerable. There's specific things that we could start promoting to help flesh out those CVEs with more metadata that would make it easier for us to validate against the deep dependency tree whether it actually got bubbled up. So, like, these are the kind of things where, yes, I agree we need to focus, and this is why I wanted scope, and it took our whole meeting to be the number one thing. But, like, just to be aware, we need to think that broadly, and I didn't even know about some of these things until I started talking to the security partners at Netflix. Like, this group is 90%. I said, well, there's 9 of us, and Jamie, I think, is the only one who really sits outside of the tooling and JavaScript ecosystem. And maybe you consider yourself tooling too. And we haven't really even heard from Jamie today. So I just want to make sure we're really good about including the right voices in this, because we can come and solutionize all we want, but without having somebody like, so I interviewed Julia to do the presentation. She's a security partner at Netflix. And a lot of this got cut because we didn't want to include a lot of things about solutions in the talk, but she brought up like 5 or 6 different great ideas for how she's worked with security researchers to help get more metadata into Netflix when they report something to a bug bounty. And, like, we don't have those voices in these conversations typically, because we've been so narrowly focused in the JavaScript tooling space that I think we need to make sure we are regularly battling against our urge to think we have the right answer and going out to those people. So ZB, I'll call on you, but then we need to move on right after you to takeaways and next steps.
so just a quick observation. We're still focusing on trying to find one solution. Meanwhile, I think it's going to be perfectly okay to start somewhere downstream with the solutions that we have ideas how to build and we understand well, and then start pushing upstream. So we want to break the chain of the CVE coming down and disturbing people, even though it's not relevant anymore. I think so my tool does it at the consumer level. We can bring it up to the package maintainer level, and we can start going up the stream until we find a way to reach the security researchers themselves, adding layers and layers of new ideas to how to move this whole thing upstream and create less noise. So I think it's perfectly fine to start with what we find familiar and figure out the way to push it up. That's what I wanted to add here.
Excellent. I agree. So I think we've had a lot of great discussion. This set, I think, a good foundation for us all to sort of better understand what we're trying to do here. I think we really, though, do need to get to what are our next steps. So it sounds like we should probably start opening issues in the repo with specific ideas that we talked about today. So we have documenting the process. We have a schema for sharing metadata about vulnerability applicability. That could be like the maintainer's counterclaim, stuff like that.
Can we make that specific? Like, I think, Nader had volunteered to contribute his as a starting point. That might be a good one for that one.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe even PR in the JSON schema would be a good PR to start with, or whatever else you think, as the owner there, what you think would be best.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask some questions asynchronously because I have some minor tooling around the schema because it's the second version, and I have a migration tool that's kind of embedded around it and validation. But yeah, let's do that offline.
Okay, and then I don't think we had any other clear to-do items from this discussion.
I'd asked Darcy. He mentioned that they've been thinking, is there something that you can share on that front, Darcy? Either share it through text issues or, present as set up a time for you to do that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, there's some stuff I can and can't share.
Sure.
So that's, I'll have to figure out what that is. But like I said before, we are probably gonna have some asynchronous work done in terms of an RC created at least within the next week or two around this kind of same kind of schema. So I think there's going to be, I'll have to figure out how we can best make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, and so that it feels like a holistic sort of approach to solving this problem, and everybody here is involved in whatever we start proposing within the NPM CLI specifically.
Okay, so I just wrote down an action for you to share that in whatever way makes sense effectively.
Yeah, so whenever that is prepared, we'll share it here as well.
And then one other thing that I'll open an issue for is outreach. So I think again, going in the topic of what I was saying, I think we're missing some voices. We need to bring those voices in. We need to hear from them. I think we need some security researchers who have been, preferably if we can find some that have been prolific in the Node.js ecosystem to discuss their process. I think we need maybe some folks from the focus on the security side from some companies. Like I might be able to tap some of the folks at Netflix. If we could maybe get some of the security team members from GitHub, that would be great. Anybody else who we think would have a good, viewpoint to share on how this process is working for them and what areas of improvement they, can see. I think that would be like another really good initial step.
There's people like that in SNCC as well.
Yeah. They would be, I think, it's really important. Okay, so we're over time. Does anybody have any last items that are for takeaways or just any announcements they wanted to get in before we end things? Okay. Well, thanks everybody. I think this was really productive and we had a great conversation. And to be honest, our month cadence after seeing how this conversation went might be too sparse because we had a lot to talk about. And I think
to start with, especially, like, we don't necessarily have to plan for more frequently forever, but to kick off, it would probably make sense to have 2 or 3 closer together.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay, so as part of the scheduling for the next meeting, we'll consider trying to get a biweekly maybe for the first little bit, and then we can slow it down as necessary. So excellent. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you in GitHub.
Yep. Thanks
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Later.
Yep.
Bye.
Here. Bye.
Bye.